A quick note, everyone, if you can't find a seat, we are streaming this simultaneously downstairs in the Maya Deren Theatre. I know that's not as exciting, but there are seats available, and we have seats down here at the front. So if you're on the side, please come and take a seat. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for the launch of Artifacts. My name is Will Markarian-Martin. I'm the creative director of Artifacts. We are a non-profit online platform whose mission is to preserve the history of the avant-garde, the arts, and queer culture through long-form video interviews, which we make available entirely for free via our online platform, www.artifacts.movie, which we launched this afternoon. Now, everyone should have received cards outlining the run of show for tonight. I'll run through it very quickly. We'll be kicking off the evening with a conversation between Artifacts' founder, Mr. Stephen Watson, and Wayne Koestenbaum. Wayne Koestenbaum, everybody. This Q&A will also include screenings of the interview content, which is available at launch, as well as a teaser of our upcoming collaboration with NYU Skirball, the Downtown Performance Series, which is launching on January the 9th next year. Then after that, there will be a performance from the one and only Chris Tanner, who will be performing the song Am I Blue in tribute to Minette, Bette Bourne, and all the others we have lost. Then after that, we will have our factory film screening taking place in the theatre downstairs. That's curated by Artifacts editor Pablo Eguía. And we will have Ken Jacobs, we will not have Ken Jacobs introducing his film. But we will have a film by Ken Jacobs alongside films by Jack Smith, Jonas Mekas, Taylor Mead, and others. A quick thank you to our sponsors, Elephant, the downtown restaurant, which is located on the site of the old Club 82 on East 4th Street. They very kindly donated all the food. If you haven't been to the restaurant yet, you should go. And their basement club in the old Club 82 opens next year, so you should go there as well. Now, thank you to Brian and the team at Soto Sake, who are behind all the incredible cocktails and sake you're drinking. We have 2 cocktails, a Miss Marsha and a Miss Sylvia. Try them at the after party. We have booze-free options from Curious Elixirs. Big thank you to Jay Wegman from NYU Skirball, who generously donated the step and repeat downstairs. To Kodak, Jay Wegman. To Kodak for supporting us with projectors, and to the incredible team of volunteers who have been helping us put this together. Everyone here is working for free in the spirit of historical preservation. So thank you to the volunteers. I really mean it. This would not have happened without you. Artifacts is a donor-sponsored platform, so if you like what you see here tonight, please speak to Katrina at our donation table downstairs. She will happily give you a tax write-off in exchange for supporting the preservation of queer culture, and in exchange, you will get a tote bag and a limited edition 16mm film strip of interviews featured in the launch. These include Betsy Johnson, John Cale, and Quentin Crisp. So go and grab one. Now, Artifacts was started with the intention of both educating and entertaining and having a cross-generational dialogue, so please enjoy yourselves at the party tonight. Peter Hale will be DJing in the lobby until 10 p.m. And with that, I wish you a wonderful evening. Thank you all for coming. Cue the video, please.
Turned into the 60s freaks.
You gorgeous. Okay. Well.
6 months years of the woman, 6 months of the man.
No question that of all of them, John Cale was the musical one.
I want to see all my friends at once. I do anything to get the chance to go bang. I want to go purr.
Almost there.
Ladies and gentlemen, the founder of Artifacts, Mr. Stephen Watson. And Wayne Koestenbaum.
So we're going to cover some information very quickly and see 3 splendid teaser reels. But I want to first just say, this is your birthday party. This isn't the main thing, this...
I feel it.
You have invented this kaleidoscopic circus tent for gender benders, underground press, doyens and maestros and silver factory people. So you have extended in a way the mandate of, call it the 60s or the 50s with the beats, in your body and in your listening all these years. You have made, you have lived in those worlds, you have recorded them with a kind of egolessness that is, so we're going to move on to talk a little bit about the Silver Factory, but I really just want to salute the grandeur of vision, the finesse of execution, and the almost spiritual leaving behind of a demand that you have a signature over everything, though we see so gloriously your inimitable handwriting in everything. That is his penmanship. That is his handwriting. Spindly, eloquent, astonishing. So let's talk a little bit about we're starting with the Silver Factory people. Did you start collecting these interviews when you were working on Factory Made, your book?
Well, I want to start with a kind of self-indulgent anecdote, but it has a point. So in March of 1966, I was in high school in Mound, Minnesota, and a friend, Mary Jo Kaplan, and I would play a 6 degrees of separation game. And she said, "How can you connect Steve Watson to Ernie Kovacs?" And I said, well, that's easy. Steve Watson's nickname is Brillo. The painter of the Brillo box is Andy Warhol. Andy Warhol's girlfriend is Edie Sedgwick. Edie is the first name of Edie Adams, who's married to Ernie Kovacs. But what's interesting about that is not that I knew Warhol. That is not so odd. But that I was aware of Edie Sedgwick, and this is long before the book. And I think it really speaks to the desire to find a tribe. When you're in the hinterlands, and there's hinterlands all over, but that desire was there from the beginning. And now, all of these years later, Mary Jo Kaplan is in this audience. And so is Edie Sedgwick's older sister, Alice. So, how could you ever figure that kind of thing would happen? So the interest went way back. But to answer your question about the interviews, yes, I started doing the interviews when I started the book Factory Made, and it really started in 1999. The first interviews were all audio, and then through a wonderful friend, Roberto Guerra, who said, I must corrupt you into using video. So I got a TRV, Sony TRV, and he taught me the basics. And I just began going places with a bag and a tripod and a microphone. It was very DIY. It's such a contrast to what you just saw, which is so flashy and so, professional. But I was able to just go wherever I wanted to. And when I look at them, there's not much of an aesthetic, except that I wanted the face to be almost covering the entire frame, and I wanted the eyes to be looking at me, so that you don't feel that you feel like the person is actually talking to you. So That was
We're going to see in a second the Silver Factory reel, but I want to just say one thing and see if you have a response if we have time, which is that, you know, the factory is so famous because of, you know, Warhol, the author of the art, as it were, but what you bring out in these interviews and in your book is how remarkable all the collaborators were, how innate their talents were, how grateful in a way at times they were for Warhol to bring them out, and that you in your interviews, I feel a through line of acknowledgement and celebration of the phenomenal performers that these people are and were.
Well, they certainly are wonderful performers, and the idea of performing themselves, of course, is central to Warhol's aesthetic. And I always have felt that cultural history is not so much about geniuses as it is about groups of people that are in various ways supportive, muses, editors. It's a real team kind of approach to creating new culture. And very often the factory, you know, it's always described as, you know, drug addicts, socialites, hanger-ons, and in a very dismissive way. It's wrong. These were people that came to the factory fully formed. And I think one of Warhol's geniuses was being able to select them and let them be themselves, because he really did not direct these films, except in the way that, in the most minimal way.
When you go home tonight, you can watch the Mary Warrenoff interview, and there's like about 30 seconds in it where she traces the genealogy of how she came to the factory. But she had already been in movies at Cornell University, with Gerard Malanga, and you see that the prehistory of the factory that you're unearthing so determined what would come forth as a product of the factory. So is it time?
It's time.
He always picked the wrong thing, and it wasn't an accident. I don't think he ever did anything accidentally.
In my experience with him, he like runs the gamut of human emotion from A to B.
And Andy made a place in this world for his genius kids that otherwise would have been on the street.
If Andy ever taught me anything in my whole life, he taught me one thing: get a receipt.
There was an aura about it. The phone was ringing and people were coming by. Extremely well-dressed individuals as opposed to these scruffy people covered in paint.
It was passion, work, pantyhose, and landing on the moon.
He understood chaos, he created it, and in chaos you can do whatever you like.
Like, he would call me up and say things like, "Bridget, my balls are itching."
Good afternoon. This is Wally Wright with the noon news.
Andy read the papers, which said this illustrator from the advertising world has dared to put up these realistic pictures of Elvis, and this is really the end of art, or something like that. And Andy said, "Oh, they hate me, and he loved it, you know.
So I knew from this experience that I had a gay audience that wanted to see me naked. So when I came into the Warhol people, you know, it was like, oh, I get this, you know, it's just a repeat of this, except the camera's moving, you know, a moving picture.
Warhol himself came across as absolutely asexual, as though looking and voyeuring and being curious about sex and all that stuff was what he enjoyed doing as a pastime.
Bridget was funny as hell, as I said. Undine was really brilliant. Of course, once I got to know them, everybody had their own particular genius.
I fell in love with John because he wanted me to design a costume for him where his hands could be on fire while he was playing, and I just thought, oh my God, that's the best.
Some drunk came up to Lou and Lou sat him down and was very nice to him, and then in the middle of the conversation Lou turned to him and said, look, let me ask you something. Would you fuck your mother?
To the cows, to Andy Warhol's cows, to the cows in the fields.
All great art, every bit of it. The very first response anybody has to really great art is, well, that isn't art. You know what I mean? And only after a while does it become art.
Because we're going to talk about gender benders. Are we
Yes.
on? Is this on? Yes. So we saw Taylor Mead is a master class in gender bending, as in her way. So is Bridget Berlin.
So is Mary Warnock.
They all are. They all are. But can you say something about how this next cluster of personages? Because there was the queer culture mentioned in the introduction, and then there's gender bending and these heroic, glamorous, self-invented explosive trajectories.
Yes.
So how did you come up with gender benders?
Well, first of all, it looks like things are planned, but they did not happen in a planned way. I realized how many interviews I had with really interesting people that were in some very dramatic way and pioneering way connected to gender questioning or whatever we might say. I trace this all back to when I first came to New York, and I got involved as an audience member with the Hot Peaches. Yes. And a founder of the Hot Peaches, Jimmy Camicia, is in the audience tonight. And the Hot Peaches, they were many things. They allowed street people to perform. They allowed anything that Jimmy or Ian MacKay thought were interesting to work with them. And it was there that I first met Marsha P. Johnson, who had worked with them. And there was a very curious figure named Minette, who was a kind of old generation doyenne and really the godmother of many figures in the ridiculous theater, in Blue Lips, in the Hot Peaches. This very curious figure. So I began going to Minette's apartment in Brooklyn and just recording Minette going through all the photo albums going back to Julian Eltinge and Carol Norman up to the present, or up to the present of 1978. That became very fascinating. I published my first quote-unquote book called Minette, Recollections of a Part-Time Lady. And what it really was more of a zine with a color Xerox cover, very thin, huge type. And the reason the type was huge was when the type was set and the pictures were there, it was picture type. So we realized we had to just blow it up 4 times, and it was terrific. And that led me to the Blue Lips, and did interviews with Bette Bourne, at the time playing Quentin Crisp. So that was a wonderful kind of crossover. And I met Quentin Crisp when he wrote a blurb for the Minette book. And it was very funny. I invited them both to dinner one night, and they really had nothing to say to each other. It was very interesting how they were entirely
Grandeur
different.
doesn't like company.
Exactly. But you know, I met Quentin in that way, and then when I first got a camera, I knew Quentin was someone I definitely wanted to interview on camera, and it was in his 90th year, and I was so astounded. He was absolutely at the top of his form, and just so giving, and he died 6 months later. So it also, the sense of the importance of capturing people when they're alive, and when they have, you know, this is a real theme that runs all through this. In the last 2 months, 2 of the people that are in the Launch series, Hetty Jones and Bette Bourne, have died. And of course, that's going to continue. But it really makes the point very poignantly clear.
Quickly, one thing before we watch the Gender Benders is I want to salute the remarkable luminousness of your listening, your capacity to listen, and to take the Quentin Crisp interview, which you can watch in its entirety tonight on your home computer. As you said to me, that Quentin Crisp had given similar interviews before. It wasn't new material, but he's really aware of Stephen's kindness, attentiveness, and the kind of cultural benediction that you give his errant style by the context that you will put that interview in, the family trees that we can see assembled on the internet. So I just wondered if you can say something about how you listened to these pioneering figures. And I know that you have a PhD in psychology, something I had forgotten, but I think it bears fruit.
Yes, it does. I mean, the PhD is the least of it, but working in a community mental health clinic for 20 years, and really a lot of that work is helping people to describe themselves and helping people put words to things that they don't have a vocabulary for. And one thing you learn is you guide and then you shut up. You lay out a pathway and then you let the person explore. Certainly many of these people they're highly verbal, and but you know, that's not the problem. But you need to avoid having people telling the same story in a rote way that they've told before. One thing that I do when I film, I am really obnoxiously over-responsive. When you're a therapist, there's a kind of tick that people say something, go, and I had to compensate for that tendency by making it physical. So there was this real physical thing, which I think makes the subjects feel more comfortable in being geeky and odd in themselves. And I think it's a funny mirroring process.
I could say from the couple of times you've interviewed me for the Prepare for Saints project, for example, I don't think I've ever been listened to with that much love. And just, but you can feel, say, oh my God, I'm starting to flourish finally. Late bloomer, but finally. So shall we see the gender benders?
Gender benders.
Well, you see, people say to me, when did you come out? And I say, I never came out because I was never in.
I lived with her for 2 years, and I never, for once, didn't think that she was a woman. She began to assume a role, thrust her bosoms over the windowsill, and then, like an Italian housewife, she said, "Bring her home with the mortadella for dinner."
Well, I've changed my name around a lot of times when I've been arrested. But my real name is Malcolm Michael. People used to see how fun I was. So first they could start calling me Michelle, and then they start calling me Marshall, so I just got Marshall. And I added on to Johnson. What does the P stand for? Well, I used to use it as Pay No Mind Jones. That's the name I used to give her. Because I used to ask her, what's the P for? She said, I don't know, it just sounds good. I said, okay, Piola, that will be your name now.
I began to be called Betty, because it alliterates with Bourne. I began to be called Bette Bourne. It allowed me to be something I hadn't been allowed to be before.
I was born Haroldo Santiago Franceschi Rodriguez Danhato. That's why I changed it to Holly Woodlawn. Holly came from Holly Golightly. The Woodlawn came from the last stop on the 8 train where the cemetery is. Rene Ricard said, oh, Holly Woodlawn, you are now the heiress to the Woodlawn Cemetery fortune.
We called it drag, but it was radical that it wasn't necessarily tits, and maybe it was beard and blue eyeshadow and lips. If it wasn't for glitter, I don't know where we would be, because if in doubt, glitter out.
Their whole life, they've been studying glamour. One time I wanted to do a book called Drag, with a period after each one of them. It was called Dedicated Ritual Artist of Glamour, because that's what they are.
When I was a child, I waltzed around the house saying, today I am a beautiful princess. I've always lived in a dream in which I was a woman. I didn't want to be a drag. I didn't want to be a figure of fun.
Back in the early 60s, we just used upper head makeup. We only got dressed in drag only for special occasions. Drag came in later on after 66. Everybody had to go in drag. It took me until 1969 to get into full drag all the time. But then I was showing the world who I was.
You know, you'd had the revolution in '69 at Stonewall, and that ricocheted over here. 70, 71, 2 guys started the Gay Liberation Front, and from there it bloomed and blossomed, and I couldn't believe in the 70s this door opening.
I decided to shave my legs and plug my eyebrows. I survived like anybody did when you're a kid at that age, you know. I sold my, you know, pussy. There was this vision in a trench coat. This is 1 o'clock at night, and she's wearing dark glasses, red lips, and she's just like, you know, underneath this lamppost, just posing. Who is that? And we said, oh, that's Candy darling. She's full of herself.
Just
before, is it on?
Is it on?
Is it on? No, yes.
There.
Okay. Before we go on to the underground press, I want to talk about briefly the well-meaning but mistaken idea when I interviewed Marsha P. Johnson. It was at the 10th anniversary of Stonewall. I thought, well, I should do the interview at the Stonewall bar. Well, of course, there's a huge amount of noise around, and it makes the tape conceptually fine, but a challenge.
Not a challenge. We accept the concept.
Okay.
The concept wins the day, and we
Yes.
listen attentively, acolytes. At her
You know,
feet.
this is really a good point. I think people are very forgiving when they see things that are rough and not polished. You very quickly get into a mindset that this is a document, this is what it is. The perfections, the imperfections, of which there are many, really fall by the wayside.
And it's also, if you have a seance with Greta Garbo, you don't say, I can't hear you, can you go to NPR? Or something. You pay attention. So I want to begin the thinking about the underground press by saying, when I was a kid in the Bay Area, I lived for the sex ads in the Berkeley Barb. I was way too young. I wasn't even chicken. I don't know what kind of meat I was, so I couldn't answer any, but I've always, those ads and the sense of their embeddedness within an underground newspaper still speaks to me, and if I could go back in time, if I could take one time travel trip in my adult body, it would be to go back to Berkeley in 1969 and answer some of those ads. So that's what spoke to me when I listened to the interviews of the underground press.
Yes. And certainly sex is a very important part of it. And music ads and drugs. Those three, and repeatedly the editors of the underground presses cited those. Those were the three cornerstones in a way. The reason I wanted to include underground press, and when I say underground press, it's a very vague term. You will see the early voice editor, John Wilcock, but you'll also see Walter Robinson, who did a small art magazine called Art Right. But it was, yay. And Walter is here tonight. And it's that style, and even what Walter said, we didn't know that we couldn't do this, so we just did it. This is something that goes back to the teens. In my first book, Strange Bedfellows, the first American avant-garde, the little magazines, from Poetry to the Little Review and onward, they are central because they are the mouthpiece of alternative styles and alternative aesthetics. So they go hand in hand with the growth of movements. So I pulled together a group from Paul Krasner, who started The Realist, which, if you do not know it, is amazing, amazing. Up to the first gay publication first weekly gay publication, Gays Week, in New York, founded in 1977, to Lawrence Ferlinghetti with City Light publication. So there's a wide range, but the role of the underground press is always important, and it continues to the presence in zines and there's so many forms that it can take.
And I feel in these interviews and in your work as a whole, definitely the romance of the material object, because I don't know what, it's not our purview to discuss this tonight, but is Substack underground press, those sort of questions about what happens to undergrounds when they're digitized like that. And this is a digital archive, but I just want to pay homage to the artifacts themselves and your love of them.
And after we finish this tonight, downstairs, Daniel Horowitz will be guiding people through real hands-on perusal of the Village Voice, the East Village Other, the Realist, Gays Week, the Berkeley Barb, the LA Free Press. So I brought my collection so you could actually not just see them under glass, but you can look at them, you can handle them, hopefully with care. And you can see the advertisements, all of the things that really bespeak what the culture was.
And the juxtapositions when you actually look at the real newspaper. The first thing I ever published in was the New York Native in the 80s, which is it's part of that same world. It's I love it. So should we see the underground press?
Yes. Yes.
There is a new kind of tabloid newspaper on the stands these days. Some people call them the avant-garde press. Others, filthy left-wing rags.
I became radical because I joined the underground press, not the other way around.
I was very much desirous of having the United States go in a socialist direction.
And I have become, at this point, kind of typesetters, printers to the gay community.
We launched our own art magazine. Now it's just a sign of what 20-somethings can do. They're full of energy and they don't know what they're trying to do is impossible.
I came into a family in which there was a place for women of achievement, and it was not only accepted, it was kind of expected.
That's what people somehow or another find very difficult doing, to deal with what happens on the spur of the moment. And yet that's exactly how we live.
And so I knew psychiatrists who would deliberately keep the Realist in their office, in the waiting room, because if people read it, they would reveal a lot of themselves to shrink when they just said what their reaction was to it. People who dated on the basis of that. You know, it was a screening device.
So there was really no place for an educated person to get quality books. When we got the door open, we couldn't get it closed. We were open from 10 a.m. to midnight right from the first day.
As I said before, I was sued by the state of California for $25 million. One of my attorneys recently retired and gave me all of my cases. And it's a 4-drawer file cabinet with 100 legal cases.
I was very green when I went off. I thought before going to jail, that at least there, I wouldn't be self-conscious. I'd have all these guys, we were all under the same pressure. We were all doing time. And at that point, I said, there can't be anything worse than that. We all will reflect. My God, how wrong can you be?
At this particular time, New York did not have a gay newspaper. None. Zero. There would be people who would come to me and say, hey, you know printing and you know typesetting and all. We want to start a newspaper. I mean, I'm the obvious guy to help make that happen, of course, right?
I went to a poetry reading by Gregory Corso. So you had a poem there, and then they would ask questions. They would say, well, Mr. Corso, when you thought readers would see that, what did you think their reaction would be? And he said, oh, look, when I write poetry, it's just like masturbating. And so I'm there as a reporter, so I said, well, let me ask you, when you're reading your poem, don't you want the audience to come?
I was a long-time dope smoker, and I once said to somebody jokingly, I said, supposing I never smoked dope, and I've only managed to do like 38 books and 1,000 columns and 800 television shows, and I said, God, if only I hadn't smoked, what I might have achieved,
I want to say, hello? Okay. I want to say one thing about one of the arts of interviewing is, first of all, getting people to agree to be interviewed. And Herbert Huncke is a, total beat legend. He's slightly off to the side, but everyone wants to talk to. And I asked him, because I wrote a book called The Birth of the Beat Generation. And he said, oh no, another interview, I don't wanna. And I said, well, Herbert, how about if I hire you for an evening for $75 as an expert in hipster slang? And he said, well, could we make it an even C note? and that led to, a somewhat academic and somewhat not academic, wonderful interview in the Chelsea Hotel in his really small room. And in the middle of it, I had to go to the bathroom, and he said, well, there's a bathroom down the hall, but just use the sink.
It's a grand tradition.
Yeah, it is.
We could all tell bathroom stories of our interviews. It's always a very revealing moment.
Yes.
So we have, I think, just really 4 minutes before we need,
really?
or 5 minutes. It is.
I'll talk.
It's 7:40. So I'm going to ask you.
Fast.
I'm going to ask one kind of grand culminating question, and
actually, there's one more video that we need to watch.
Oh God. Okay. Well, then the culminating question will be quick.
Okay.
Okay. The culminating question is how you made there are hoarders and collectors who are private and they amass phenomenal archives, and it's a private pile.
Yes.
And then there's you, who have amassed these things, and the pandemic could have been the moment when you said, I'm just going to hug these to my breast, and the world is over. But
Yes.
instead, it seems like a moment when you said, I'm going to give this to the world.
Yeah.
So can you say something just about that?
Exactly. I mean, there's always the thing of your work going into archives, And archives are wonderful, but you have to be aware that your work is going to go into the basement for a long time. And I wanted my work in the interviews, it's not so much about my work, but these voices, to be seen while I was alive and kicking. You know, that's a really big thing.
And it's a very generous thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a party too. It's a way of making, instead of woodlawn, you know, it's a kind of bringing them simultaneously back as a kind of rejuvenating chorus that we all need right now.
We sure do.
Yes. Okay, so let's see the last movie.
I think
it was this community of kind of like-minded people who were exploring what theatre could be or should be.
The Pyramid Cocktail Lounge.
Avenue A was like the edge of the world.
We went inside and there were people dancing on the bar, and that we had found our fellows. There were revelations waiting to be found.
They were two branches of the same thing, so it was Ronnie Tavel and Charles Ludlam, and they were partners at one point, and then they had a falling out.
If you would speak to Ronnie Tavel, he would deny the truth. But that's the story of his life.
I'm a worker in the field, like anybody else, and I happen to work in theater.
So that's the next?
Yes.
So that's the next installment?
Yes, and I want to mention that Jay Wegman of the Skirball Center approached me because they're approaching their 25th anniversary, and they want to, do a celebration of downtown performance. So, two things. This is the next thing that's happening, but it also speaks to the ongoing nature of what Artifacts is. It's the collection of what I've done in the past, but it's very much an ongoing project. And there's a real urgency about getting the voices and the memories of what I think are some of the most important decades in cultural change. So you're seeing the past. Time always is a part of this. Time in the sense of when you did the interview about people talking about something 30 years ago, and the time that elapses between the interview and now, and how the interview will be seen in the future. So there's the dimensionality of it is really important.
That's such an eloquent way to phrase the palimpsest that every interview is, and that this entire project is, as a clarion call, as a container of the past, as a set of maps, prompts, inspirations. Just, I will say personally, what I have learned from the Bette Bourne and Quentin Crisp interviews about tempo. I am not executing that tonight, but I will, on future stages, make palpable those lessons learned. Do you want to say something in conclusion?
Yes, I do. I want to introduce the team. Because a couple of things. I know from my research and past groups, the first phase is always the most exciting and the most creative. And tonight, in a way, is the culmination of that period. And I could not have been more happy with the people I've worked with, who you're seeing not just the people in the interviews and my interviewing, you're seeing how they are shaped. So I'm going to begin with the person that goes furthest back, and that is Will Markarian-Martin. Could you just, why don't you all just, parade by. Okay.
Thank you.
And the second person that was involved is Johan Giraud, who designed the incredible website, who flew here from Belgium to be here for the launch. Come. Everyone has to come. And the next person was Auel Kanaybekov, our editor, the first editor. And the second editor is Pablo Eguía. Yay! And the next person is Maxwell Gutierrez. Okay. And finally, Linda Saetre, who is project manager and really kept this going, particularly moving up to this launch, because there are so many moving pieces, and she did a lot. But this evening, it's Will. So I'm very happy to work with you.
So what's the next step in the evening, my dear friend?
Okay.
Chris Tanner is waiting in the wings.
Yes. Okay, so should we...
So we decamp and you all do as well to attend the next...
I'm going to say a little bit more about what's coming up. So there's Chris Tanner. On this stage over there are Quentin Crisp's collection of scarves. And we have Philip Ward, who was Quentin's last partner and his executor, who will be available to talk about the tales of the scarves and whatever you want. On this side, we have a display of Betsy Johnson and several of her outfits on mannequins, plus her interview. If you go downstairs, don't skip the toilets. That's always a good motto. Because you'll see several other Holly Woodlawn and several other interviews. And then there is a major selection of films that Pablo created in the Maya Deren Theater. And the public underground press publishing on the main lobby. But this is a make-your-own adventure. There's lots going on, and you can't do it all. So choose wisely. But most of all, there is an incredible group of people here tonight, and I say, talk to them. So
Make
that's it.
history right now. Thank you, Stephen. A round of applause for Stephen.
Don't leave the theatre just yet, everyone. We have Chris Tanner coming to the stage.
Here with you all tonight, honoring all our gorgeous queens. Yes. And so tonight, I'm going to sing a little song honoring the queens, our dear ones that have passed. Most recently, Bette Bourne. Yay, Betty! She was my dear friend, and she introduced me to La Mama and brought me to La Mama in 1981 to John Vaccaro's show. And then she made me the first American Blue Lips. And I also am dedicating this song to my other friend, the fabulous Minette, who sang this song in another friend of mine, the fabulous Mother Flawless Sabrina. In her movie, The Queen, Minette sang this song. So here's to you, Bet, Minette, and Flawless. Got my little pitch pipe here. Am I blue? Am I blue? Ain't these tears in these eyes telling you? Am I blue? You'd be too if each plan with your man done fell through. There was a time I was his only one, but now I'm the sad and lonely one. Lordy, was I gay till today? But he's gone and we're through. Am I blue? But he's gone and we're through. Am I blue? Thank you. Thank you. Mwah.
Thank you, everybody. Please take your cups and other detritus with you. Thank you.